So yesterday I finished Brooklyn Nine-Nine as the last season finally made it to Netflix, and I already knew that it was going to be talking about some very heavy topics. However, I have to agree with a lot of people out there, it felt like it's just a little bit too much. I honestly think the best way of describing it is just uncomfortable. Now, I think it's important to talk about these topics, and I think it's important to address them. However, I do think parts of it, let's say talking about the racist part of the entire season, the first half of the season is dedicated to it pretty much, has already been delved very deep into throughout the whole show's history. And all the conversations around the idea of stop and search for like a good season that happened, the police brutality side of things, I think could have been handled with a lot more grace than what they did in the first episode. It just felt way too forced in, especially for the opening episode of a season, and it makes it extremely hard to watch the rest. And the whole point of the first episode of any season is to set the tone for the rest of the episodes. And to me, I'll be honest, I was sat there and it felt so jammed in and a lack of comedy that it just didn't feel like the same show. Brooklyn Nine-Nine has always been able to talk about these topics, from Terry being stopped for being black, Rosa having the issues with her family before coming out as bi, Amy having her episode talking about sexual harassment, and then all the way through to things like Holt and everything that he's faced throughout the entire time of, his history as a police captain, his history as just being in the police as a black gay detective. All of this, though, was handled with grace and actually stuck the landing with a mixture of comedy that actually kept the serious moments serious, but allowed it to actually get into your head without it feeling as if it's being rammed in without any comedy, when that's the whole point of the show. It is a comedy show. I already knew going into the first episode that it was going to be a heavy topic talked about, and I literally said to my girlfriend, how long do you think it's going to take within this first episode for something to be mentioned around the topic that, is around the police brutality, specifically around black people? And it's literally 20 seconds in. And the most funny part of the show in that entire point is a high-fiving stick about COVID. Literally, there is next to no comedy in that first episode, because it's all dedicated to just appeasing a particular way. At heart, Brooklyn Nine-Nine for me was always escape for reality, and based on what I've seen online of a lot of other people as well, that seems to be the case. Which is defined for me as a comfort show. I have things like Big Bang Theory and this show as my comfort shows. When I don't feel great and I want to just, relax and just completely disassociate from reality, watching those shows does that for me. But what we ended up watching with this season was a complete connection to reality that just felt uncomfortable. For quite a while, I was struggling to nail down exactly how I felt with Season 8 when I was finishing up yesterday. And the word that I can only use is uncomfortable. And I even think, and I'm going to mention this a little bit later, I think even Season 7 felt just strange and odd. Neither season feels like the same show from Seasons 1 to 6, whereas Seasons 7 and 8, there is a blatant change up in a few different things. What I also found a bit absurd was having the character of Rosa becoming the anti-cop character, which to me makes no sense. Like, sure, she had that one moment in the past where she basically asks if she's a part of the problem or they are a part of the problem. However, her character is very literally the character who hits people regularly, verbally abuses so many characters throughout the whole of this show, and now they decide to make her the anti-cop character. It just felt really strange, and as if they were just trying to stretch to have some form of connection to this social issue. Since the takeover by NBC, I'd say the show was just shot differently as well, so Season 7 felt that a little bit strange weirdness to it, and I think some of you might understand what I mean by this. And the one episode that I'd say really sunk in for me was the episode where the guy who plays Samwise from Lord of the Rings is in it, and he's hacking into the 9-9. And it just felt really off, and I was thinking about it for quite a while, and I came to the conclusion that it was the camera angles. There was just something different. And the thing that I'll use as my comparison here is that in this season and going onwards, they decide to prioritize having one person on screen and in conversations with one another. So for example, what you'd notice within let's say the normal seasons of the show, when they're going into an elevator and they're talking to one another, you'd have a camera that would have both of them in shot. And then, if they want to zoom in on a character's face, they would do it. However, you'd still be able to see the shoulder of the other person. So it still felt like the same place. Whereas this felt like they just kept zooming in on the characters, hardly ever showing both of them in the elevator at this together in one shot, going back and forth, and never really showing that they're both on there. It could have literally been a scene that theoretically they recorded completely separate from one another, and they just mashed it together to create this entire part. And to me, it just felt off, and it kind of bleeds into the rest of the show as well. Overall, I do think one of the issues with this season is that they went a little bit too woke. And I don't use that word lightly. I genuinely don't like using the word. I think that it's basically lost most of its meaning. However, I think Season 8 encapsulates this idea. It was just this massive push towards a progressive way of viewing things and the progression of what happened within 2020 and entering into 2021. It just felt a bit too much. And it was as if they just decided to remove what was a good part of the show. What I will say is that I do think the second half of the show, second half of the season, is handled a lot better. And that does come down to the fact that the first 4 episodes of this season were completely scrapped due to the issues that obviously went on. They end up scrapping these episodes to push these 4 episodes out that are around about police brutality and then also racism. And to me, again, it felt so incredibly forced that it made it uncomfortable to watch, to the point where I literally ended up at one point just having to skip an episode because I was like, I can't deal with this. I know what's going to happen. And I was just like, you know what? I can't. I have to just move on, because it literally felt like I was just watching something, never enjoying it, and I wouldn't have watched this in the future anyway. Would I like to see a spin-off of this show? Maybe. I think it would be interesting. However, I think it's better to be left. If I'm honest, I'd rather just have the entire first half of that season completely scrapped altogether, and if not, to be honest, the entirety of the last season gone altogether. The end episode was great, I'll have to admit it. I do think that that final was actually a heartfelt final that felt like the show we've been watching for all of these years, but sadly, I think it didn't end on the great note that they wanted it to end on. When I go back to rewatch this show in the future, I will probably be skipping a few episodes from both Season 7 and 8. I think Season 7 for me is just that it felt very off. I think the mixture of higher production value and then also the fact that the camera angles were so strange to me, it just felt off, not like the same show anymore. And then with Season 8, I would say you end up with this issue, like I mentioned, of just extreme activism within a show that is meant to be comedy first. And like I said, I'm happy for them to discuss these topics, and I would have been happy for them to discuss those topics properly. However, they could have been handled a lot better. They could have been handled like the episode that is dedicated to Terry being pulled over for being black within the neighborhood that he lives within. That episode was perfect, in my opinion, when it came to trying to push the message that they wanted to push. And guess what? They've been doing it the whole time. It's like they're talking to an audience who've already been watching the show anyway, that's got a black gay police captain, a black sergeant, 2 Latino women, 1 woman who is bi, then the rest of them who are just basically a bunch of just, idiotic men who just, fit that stereotypical character, and then Jake's character kind of being progressed. I think that they didn't really think about who their audience is for this season. It felt more like pandering to a wider audience than it felt actually making a season for your actual fans. Anyway, I thought I'd just make this video because I watched it, and like I said, for this channel's existence, I'm just talking about whatever I watch, from films to TV. And yeah, hopefully nobody gets the wrong image of me trying to say this, but I just think that it just wasn't handled well. I think they could have done a lot better job of it and done it in a better way that gave the comedy in there to lighten the mood a little bit. And you might have the argument that, why would they lighten a mood on something so serious? They've done it before and it worked. Sue them, don't sue me. But yeah, anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like, do subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.